I'm Sarah Baxley, and welcome to Pinky the Bear. This is my Mystics, Metaphysics, and Mindfulness channel, and I'm here today with your astrology forecast for the week of September 30th, 2018. So the two upcoming themes for this week are 1. Flipping the switch on power and control, and 2. The slow unravel of love and possession. All right, so let's start out with the first theme of the week, which is flipping the switch on power and control. So that first theme of the week has to do with two different transits that are going on. One is on Sunday, September 30th, which is Pluto stationing direct. And the second one, it also has to do with Pluto, which is Mercury square Pluto, that's on Tuesday, October 2nd. And for sake of ease in astrology, we call Pluto a planet. We know that it's really a dwarf planet. We just do it out of sake of ease. I personally love it because it's got a really funky orbit. But, basically, there's always a couple kitschy words that come out when people are talking about Pluto. And I feel like in astrology, and I feel like one of them is like rebirth and transformation and all of that stuff. And though it's well and good and potentially is essentially, I guess, a byproduct on the other end of Pluto transits, which last a very long time. Something that's really important is like Pluto is brutal. Like Pluto honestly is like power and control. Anywhere that you see Pluto, like in your own chart, like with synastry charts, like with transit work, like Pluto ultimately comes down to power and control. It's a very slow moving planet. It takes a really long time for it to go around the sun. It moves really slow, and so when Pluto is in a sign, it's in a sign for an entire generation, between 15 to 30 years sometimes. And the thing is that, Pluto is basically, it's retrograde for 6 months out of the year, which means from our view on Earth, it appears to be going backwards in the sky. And the other 6 months of the year, it's stationed direct, and it's moving forward, or appearing to move forward in its orbit. But ultimately comes down to power and control. And the thing is that, with Pluto retrograde, it's not like we feel it, as strong as we do personal planetary retrogrades with Mercury, Venus, and Mars. With Pluto retrograde, I like to view them with Pluto and with outer planets as like an introspection time. So with Pluto retrogrades, it's an introspective time when you're kind of assessing what power, like again, back to power and control, like what does that mean for you in your personal life? In what ways do you want, do you have to exercise control in your own life, in your own immediate environment, right? Within, the dynamics of your relationships, the dynamic with yourself, the way that you control your own environment, stuff like that. And now that's when Pluto is retrograde. So now we have Pluto that's stationing direct on Sunday, September 30th, and Pluto direct, when Pluto's direct, it's kind of more of an outward expression of Pluto, right? So back to power and control, instead of it being like a personal thing, it's more of like a group thing, right? Pluto moves really slow, so it affects like whole generations. So when we're dealing with themes of power and control, it's like, how are we as a society dealing with the themes of power and control, right? And so it's kind of like, and where do I fit in? The I that kind of like reevaluated my own power and control while Pluto is retrograde. How do I then fit in with the society with these themes of power and control? So that's something that's really important. So that's kind of stationed direct on Sunday. So then the second part of that, that first theme, number one, which is flipping the switch on power and control, is when Mercury comes to square Pluto on this upcoming Tuesday. And essentially when Mercury is, and that's on Tuesday, October 2nd. And I want for you to write 3 days down, okay? I want you to get a little pen. Aside from this week, I want you to write down October 10th, October 11th, and October 24th, okay? Because kind of the themes that are going to pop up this week around Tuesday and Wednesday, they're going to repeat themselves again on October 10th and 11th, because on October 10th and 11th, that's when the sun comes to square Pluto from the same degree that Mercury is doing this week. We also have, that's the same day that Venus is coming to square Mars, and then that's also the same day that the moon is conjunct Jupiter. So there's a lot that's going on around the 10th and 11th, and then we have the full moon that's on October 24th. So anyway, so basically, let's go back to Tuesday, right, which is like the second half of this theme, which is the flipping the switch on power and control. So on Tuesday, we have Mercury come to square Pluto. So squares are essentially when two planets in our solar system make a 90-degree angle to one another, right? It's like one is coming from one direction and the other is coming from another direction. So we have Pluto, which is the planet of power and control, coming up against Mercury, which is communication, and they're kind of coming from opposite places, right? And they're kind of coming to square one another, right? They're kind of not really getting along, and they have to kind of come up with some type of a compromise. So, there can be, even within our interpersonal relationships, I mean, we're definitely going to see it in a societal way, but within our interpersonal relationships, also kind of really thinking about kind of this like the power exchange, like with communication, right? Kind of like the volume can kind of get turned up a little bit, maybe tempers can kind of be flared a little bit more. There's like maybe a little bit more aggression than there normally would be in the air. So just kind of be mindful of that this upcoming Tuesday. So then I want to kind of hop into theme number 2 of the week, which is the slow unravel of love and possession. And I know that that's kind of like a dramatic title. I was like trying to think of like something creative that kind of like tied in with all of the different themes and symbolism. But this all kind of revolves around the upcoming Venus retrograde that happens on October 5th. And basically Venus retrograde is, again, with retrograde planets, it's when a planet appears to be going backwards in the sky in its orbit. And, the thing is that Venus retrogrades only happen about once every year and a half. There's certain cliche things that, people say, like, to do or don't do, or that may or may not happen, like, during Venus retrograde. I mean, I have certainly kind of, like, pushed the buttons and been like, oh, yeah, well, let's see, like, in previous Venus retrogrades, and, some of the, like, stereotypical things around Venus retrogrades are true. I'm not gonna lie, it's true. So Venus, let's take like a step back. So just Venus in general, Venus rules, Venus kind of represents beauty and harmony and love and also the arts and wealth and femininity. So when we have Venus retrograde, Venus is what makes things beautiful. Like Venus is kind of like what gives kind of a more pleasant aesthetic to things, right? So with Venus retrograde, just things kind of tend to be a little bit more lackluster, right? Not necessarily bad, just kind of like meh, right? Just like a little bit more lackluster, right? Just not as, just like there's not as much bells and whistles on things as there normally would be when Venus is direct. So luckily it only happens once every year and a half. But the things are, sometimes we have former lovers that kind of re-enter our lives or get back in contact with us at that time. Often they recommend, like, against doing, if you're going to do some type of major beauty procedure, maybe potentially holding off during Venus retrograde. Same thing with any, like, super major financial investments, because Venus can also, be associated with money. So, these are just kind of different things to kind of keep in mind. But, I do think it's interesting that this Venus retrograde is starting in the sign of Scorpio, which is a fixed water sign, right? It's very much about kind of plunging into these really deep emotional depths, right? Potentially feelings of possessiveness and jealousy can kind of like arise as well. So we kind of have these like deep emotional depths wrapped around the feminine, wrapped around beauty, wrapped around harmony, that are kind of, getting ready to kind of come to a halt and kind of like move backwards a little bit, right? So just keep that in mind. That's going to be October 5th through November 16th. Anyway, I know that's a lot of information to kind of take in, but I just wanted to, just kind of like hone in. Like there's definitely, October is definitely kind of a more tough month. Like I'm not going to kind of sugarcoat it. It's more tough. It's definitely more tough. And again, like I think I said those dates before, definitely be mindful this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week. Then again, jot down on your calendar October 10th, 11th, as well as October 24th, because those are all days that kind of the themes and things that have a lot to do with kind of, themes with power and control and, and all of that are going to kind of also, I think, resurface around those times as Venus makes her way as well. So again, about this power control and the feminine and everything else. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoy your week, and don't forget to subscribe or comment, say hello. I always love to kind of chit-chat back and forth down in the comments below. But anyway, thanks again so much, and I will see you around. Cheers.